3 weeks before my son's wedding, a message flashed on my phone. It was from Sarah, his bride-to-be. The words were short, careless, final. "Mom, for the vibe, please don't come." I read it twice, then a third time, as if maybe the letters would rearrange themselves into something kinder. They did not. For the vibe, as if my presence, the woman who raised her groom, would somehow poison the air she wanted to breathe on her big day. Before I had time to swallow the sting, my phone rang. It was Camille, the wedding planner. Her voice was crisp, professional, detached. "Mrs. Hale, I'm just calling to confirm. We've been told you won't be attending. But of course, your deposit remains non-refundable. $85,000. The vineyard, the suites, the chef." I could hear her fingers typing notes as she spoke, moving on with business as usual. To her, I was just another box to check off on her screen. I set down the cup in my hand, a porcelain teacup from Napa, bought decades ago on a trip with my late husband. A fine crack ran down its side, a hairline fracture that never quite reached the rim. I had kept it all these years. I tapped it gently against the table, a hollow sound that filled my quiet kitchen. Then I answered, steady and calm. "Cancel the vines. Cancel the suites. Cancel the chef. I own the vineyard. And the hotel next door." Silence. Pure silence. I could almost hear her breath catch. Paper shuffled. A chair scraped. She had not expected that. None of them had. People often mistake quiet for weakness, but quiet can hold teeth. Quiet can redraw lines. That day, I learned again that a vessel may be cracked, but it still holds water if you know how to carry it. That is where my story begins. If you believe women like me, mothers, widows, women who've been overlooked, deserve their seat at the table, then stay with me. This story is about finding your voice when others erase it. And if you want more stories of quiet strength turning into justice, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and tap the bell so you won't miss what comes next. It is free, and it helps us reach others who need to hear this. Now, let me tell you what happened next. I'm Sylvia Hale. I'm 62 years old. I buried my husband Daniel nearly 10 years ago, and since then I've lived in the house we bought together, with the red brick porch and the roses I planted myself. My son Ethan grew up there, eating pancakes at the counter every Saturday, rushing out the door with his backpack half open, calling, "Bye, Mom." He is the center of my life, even now. I thought that when he found a partner, I'd be gaining a daughter, not losing a son. But families don't always write the stories we expect them to. Sarah entered Ethan's life like a storm in summer. Fast, dazzling, and impossible to ignore. She is younger than Ethan, with a sharp eye for aesthetics. Everything had to look perfect. The venue, the flowers, the pictures, and apparently the guest list. The first time she visited our vineyard, the Hale Vineyards, she thought it was charming. She didn't know the vineyard had been built on decades of my sweat and my husband's dream. She didn't know that the suites her bridal party had reserved, or the menus planned by Chef Luke, all traced back to me. That was by choice. I had never told her. It's strange, isn't it? Sometimes we hide our strength to make others comfortable. We don't want to appear as if we're showing off or intimidating. We keep quiet. But the cost of silence can be steep. When Sarah texted me those 10 words, Mom, for the vibe. Please don't come. She wasn't just uninviting me from her wedding. She was erasing me. And when Camille, the planner, told me the deposit was non-refundable, she was stamping that erasure into a contract. They thought I would take it. They thought I would stay silent, like I always had. They didn't know that silence can turn sharp when you finally use it. They didn't know that the Vineyard, the hotel next door, the entire celebration they were building, belonged to me. So I smiled into the phone, and I said the words that turned everything upside down. Cancel the vines. Cancel the suites. Cancel the chef. I own the Vineyard and the hotel next door. That was the first domino to fall. And once it fell, nothing in our family was ever the same again. I did not start out powerful. I started out tired, broke, and stubborn, standing beside Daniel on a patch of soil no bank wanted. The realtor called it a hobby vineyard, which is a polite way of saying it lost money. Daniel ran his fingers through the dust and said, "We can teach it to live." I believed him because he spoke softly, and soft words can move rock when you repeat them long enough. The first winter we owned it. The vine slept while the bills did not. I worked days at a clinic and nights at the tasting room we built from a shed. Daniel repaired pumps, patched hoses, and learned to read the wind. My sister, Margaret, came on weekends with a thermos of soup. She packed cases until her knuckles cracked. We laughed at ourselves, two women arguing over labels, while Daniel tuned the tractor. We learned the land like a body, where frost bit, where sunlight lingered, where the soil swallowed water, and where it held. We lost a season, then two, before something turned. A harvest pressed clean. A critic noticed. A restaurant in town poured our white by the glass. When Ethan was little, he rode the forklift like a pirate ship and ate grapes until his stomach hurt. He watched me count tips and asked if we were rich. "Not yet," I said. "We are building something that will not embarrass you." He giggled and tucked a cork behind his ear like a pencil. Then the heart attack came like a thief. Daniel was gone in the space between a breath and the next. The vineyard went quiet. I sat on the porch with a porcelain teacup we had bought in Napa, a fine crack around the belly, and I decided to keep the vineyard because grief needed work more than rest. I learned the parts Daniel had hidden from me to be kind. The spreadsheets, the tax calls, the lender who smiled when we were small and grimaced when we dared to grow. I made mistakes and paid for them. I learned the law that protects a brand and the clause that cancels a lie. I bought the parcel next door when a family moved away. I bought the inn when the owner wanted out. Hale Vintners and Lodging became a quiet chain of rooms and vines under one signature. By the time Ethan was in college, the company was worth about $60 million, the appraiser said with his cautious pencil. I did not tell Ethan that number. I did not want money to walk into our kitchen at home before wisdom did. I wanted my son to feel like a man, not a beneficiary. So I stayed quiet. I let him think I loved the plants and the people more than the ledgers, which was true, but not the whole truth. Margaret asked once why I did not show the whole picture. Because power can bruise a child if you hand it to him too early, I said. Give him a handrail, not a throne. She nodded and kept packing cases. We both thought silence was tenderness. We were not wrong, not then. But silence grows habits in others too. It tells them you will carry the heavy things and ask for nothing. It tells them your name can be left off the program and the bill will still be paid. It tells a bride she can curate a vibe and delete a mother. I stayed quiet so love could breathe. Then quiet became a door they shut in my face. That morning when Sarah texted me, I set the Napa cup down and felt the crack with my thumb. A vessel can be flawed and faithful at the same time. You just need the right hand to lift it. I decided to be my own steady hand. The morning after Sarah's text, my phone did not rest. First, it was Ethan. His voice carried that practiced calm he uses when he is nervous. "Mom, let's keep this light. Sarah just wants the day to feel easy, you know? No pressure, no family tension." He said the words as if I were the tension itself, as if my presence were a storm cloud. I answered slowly, careful not to spill heat. "I thought weddings were about family standing together." He sighed, silence stretched. Then he repeated, "It's for the vibe, Mom. Just let us have this." Not long after, Sarah called herself. Her voice cracked, almost rehearsed. She cried softly, telling me she worried I would make people uncomfortable. "You're strong, and sometimes that can feel intimidating," she said. I listened, not correcting her, not feeding the performance. She wrapped her words in fear but left no space for my dignity. I thought of the years I had carried her fiancé on my hip, wiping jam from his chin, sewing patches on his jeans. Intimidating was a strange word for love that had worked its hands raw. By afternoon, a new number appeared. Linda, Sarah's mother, introduced herself in a tone polished with sweet varnish. "Sylvia, dear, I hope you understand. This is their day. Best to let the young ones make their choices without interference." Interference. That was the word she chose for a mother attending her only son's wedding. I thanked her politely and ended the call. When kindness is sharpened into a blade, the cut stings deeper. Later, Camille, the planner, circled back with careful phrasing. "Mrs. Hale, I'm confirming that all contracts remain intact. The bride's side indicated your deposit should be honored. The event will proceed smoothly, even if your attendance is not expected." Not expected. Another phrase for erased. She was trying to keep her tone neutral, but I heard the current beneath it. Money in, name out. I set my notebook on the counter and wrote everything down. Date, time, exact words. I tapped the record button on my phone before the next call. Gaslight is slippery, but paper holds still. They might recast my presence as drama, but the record would remain. That evening, I forwarded the notes and recordings to Avery Chen, the attorney who has advised me since Daniel's passing. Avery read fast and spoke faster. "Sylvia, you are the contracting party of record. Do you still hold signature authority?" I opened the email folder Daniel had once labeled Iron Keys. At the top sat the scanned agreement, 10 years old, bearing my signature alone. The authority had never been transferred. I felt my pulse slow, even as Avery confirmed it. Then no one else has the right to alter attendance terms while retaining your funding. That is misrepresentation at minimum. I closed the laptop and stared at the crack in my porcelain cup. I thought of Ethan's sigh, Sarah's tears, Linda's sweet poison. Each voice tried to make me smaller. Each call dressed cruelty in reasonableness. And yet, tucked inside an old email, the truth sat firm. Still, the question gnawed. Should a mother fight her own child on paper, even when the law stood on her side? Should I be the one who drags contracts into a church aisle? Love whispers, yield. Dignity answers, stand. I sat in that space between them, the weight of motherhood pressing against the weight of self-respect. I poured a little wine into the cracked cup, watching the liquid pool without leaking. The vessel held because I knew how to carry it. I had held silence for decades to keep peace. But silence, I realized, was being twisted into consent. And I could not consent to my own erasure. Rosa knocked on my back door just after sunrise, jacket zipped, hair tied with the red bandana she saves for pruning. She is 55, a widow like me, and she has worked these rows long enough to know each trellis by sound. She stepped inside without ceremony and held out a book with both hands. "For you," she said. From him. The book was our old season ledger, the one Daniel kept before I typed his notes into spreadsheets. The cover had gone soft with years. The spine sighed when I opened it. Inside was his handwriting, careful. Dates and weather sketches, circles around mildew, stars for the rows that behaved. Rosa pointed to a margin where he had written, in block letters, "Hold fast." We sat at the kitchen table. Light came through the curtains in narrow ladders. I set out 2 cups and reached for the porcelain one from Napa. The hairline crack shone like a pale thread around its belly. I touched it with my thumb. Rosa watched my hand and laughed softly. "You remember the day it chipped?" she asked. I did. We had been late, and the chain on the tractor slipped. I ran to fetch the thermos, tripped on a hose, and the cup bounced across the porch like a stone over water. I cried over ceramic while Daniel crouched to gather the pieces. "Don't throw it away," he said, holding the largest shard to the light. "The crack tells a story. Besides, it still holds. We just have to carry it right." He glued the handle back on that night and drew a tiny line in the ledger next to the frost forecast. A private joke I only catch now. Rosa flipped pages until she found a spread from the year before he died. Notes on canopy, a small heart beside the block we planted the week Ethan turned 10. "He wrote so you wouldn't forget," she said. "But you haven't forgotten." They have. She meant the people building a wedding, all surface, no roots. I poured tea. The steam curled, then thinned. Rosa cupped her hands around her mug and looked at me, steady. "Miss Hale," she said, "they want to erase a story, not a cup. They think a vibe is more important than the woman who made the field ready." She reached across and pressed the ledger's edge so it would lie flat. "You kept quiet so the fruit could speak. Now they are using quiet to pretend you were never here." Her words landed without fuss, like winter rain sinking into well-tilled soil. I traced the ink where Daniel had drawn a tiny cluster and wrote, "Third leaf finally sings." The page smelled of dust and eucalyptus. Outside, the wind moved down the rows. "What do I do?" I asked, "to keep from breaking the cup?" Rosa tilted her head. "You carry it like you always have. 2 hands, no apology. And if someone tries to snatch it, you hold tighter, not to hurt them, but to keep the tea from spilling." She tapped the ledger again. "There is a way to stand that is not a shove." I closed the book and set it beside the cup so the crack and the word "hold fast" were in the same frame. "Thank you," I said. Rosa shrugged. He told me once you were the root, and he was the trellis. Roots do not brag. They also do not move. I breathed, steady as new winter. She rose, kissed my hair like a daughter, and left for the vines. The gate at Hale Vineyards is iron, painted black, and heavy enough that it groans when I swing it open. Beyond it, the rows roll down into the valley, winter bare but steady, vines tied like patient hands behind their backs. I stood there with my scarf pulled close, holding the folder Avery had brought. He parked his sedan beside the stone pillar and walked to me with that quick lawyer stride, papers tucked under his arm. "Mrs. Hale," he said businesslike, "we have options. None of them require shouting." He placed the folder on the flat of the gatepost and opened it with 2 fingers. Inside were 3 tabs, each a path written in black letters. Option 1. Suspension pending verification. That means we freeze all vendor activity until authority is clarified. No contracts are broken, but nothing moves forward either. It's a pause, not a strike. He looked at me, making sure I understood. Option 2. Claim of unauthorized contact. That clause states no third party may alter agreements without written approval of the contracting authority. Since you never signed over your rights, any instruction from Ethan, Sarah, or Linda has no legal weight. We can nullify their requests. He tapped the page. And option 3, defamation. They suggested to vendors that you were unstable. That opens a door we could walk through if you choose. I listened while the wind threaded itself through the bare canes, making a sound like paper torn gently. The gate pressed cold against my palm. Avery's tone was precise, not cruel. He was offering tools, not revenge. "They will say you are ruining a wedding," he added softer. "Our answer will be simple. You are protecting agreements you lawfully hold. This is not about anger. It is about contract." I thought of Ethan's sigh on the phone, Sarah's tears that felt rehearsed, Linda's sweet voice sharp underneath. Each one a blade, telling me to yield for the vibe. Yield, yield, yield. But here in Avery's folder was the other voice, the one Daniel once taught me. Hold fast. I opened the folder wider. The defamation clause looked harsh in print. Words about damages, injury to reputation, recovery of costs. I imagined courtrooms, reporters, Ethan shrinking in the back row. My chest tightened. That was not my path. But suspension pending verification. That one rang true. It was clean, temporary, enough to remind them I was still here without tearing everything down. I lifted the pen Avery handed me. My hand did not shake. "Are you sure?" he asked. I nodded. "This is not retaliation. This is clarity. We suspend until the record is corrected." I signed my name, Sylvia Hale, across the bottom, black ink on white. No raised voice, no slammed door, only paper. For a long moment, we said nothing. The only sound was wind moving through vine leaves left from last harvest, brown and curled, rattling like thin bones. I looked down the rows that Daniel once walked, hands brushing tendrils, whispering forecasts only the plants believed. The valley waited, quiet, as if it too had signed with me. Avery closed the folder and tucked it back under his arm. "They will know by morning. Vendors must obey the suspension order. No event moves forward without you." I thanked him. He shook my hand firmly, then left me at the gate. I stayed, one hand on cold iron, one hand in my pocket holding the key. Silence has many shapes. Sometimes it is weakness, a swallowed word. Sometimes it is the strongest act you can make. That day at the gate, silence was my answer. The vines did not move, but the wind did. It swept down the valley, carrying with it the message no text, no tear, no polished phrase could erase. I am still here. Ethan, I am writing this at the kitchen table, where you learned to count by lining up blueberries across the wood. The house is quiet. The vineyard is asleep. I do not know if I will ever send this. Maybe it will live in the drawer with spare keys and old photos. You told me you wanted the wedding to feel easy. You said it was for the vibe. I understand the wish. Ease without truth ferments into something bitter. It looks pretty in the glass and burns your throat when you swallow. I chose silence so that you could grow without the shadow of a powerful mother narrowing your sky. When money began to gather like birds on a wire, I pushed it off the kitchen table. I taught you to fuel a beater car and to apologize. I made you earn summer jobs under your own name. I sat in the bleachers and clapped like every other mother. I do not regret it. And that mattered. But silence can be read like an empty chair. People write their own stories in the space where your name should be. Soon, the story hardens into policy. I watched that happen this week. Sarah texted. The planner confirmed. Her mother called with honey in her voice and a knife in every sentence. They did not ask whether I was welcome. They informed me. The deposit could stay. The woman could go. I felt anger. Then I felt the old discipline return. I called the lawyer. I read the contracts I signed. I opened the Iron Keys folder and remembered what I control and what I refuse. I do not raise my voice. I raise the standard. This is the rule I wish I had taught you more directly. Standards protect everyone in the room, especially the ones who think they do not need protecting. There is something else I should have said when you called. I know that I am a strong flavor. Strength looks like judgment. Competence can feel like criticism. I cannot make myself smaller to keep anyone comfortable anymore. Shrinking is not hospitality. Shrinking is a slow erasure. If I model it for you, you will learn to ask the people who love you most to disappear whenever a room gets delicate. I will not teach you that. I raised you to keep your word. A contract is a promise with dates on it. I am the contracting party for the venue and the hotel. I signed because your father trusted me to build shelters that hold. When others tried to speak for me this week, they crossed a line I cannot ignore. I pressed pause, not because I wanted revenge, and not because I wanted an audience, but because pause is the smallest tool that still tells the truth. I am not asking you to choose between your wife and your mother. That choice is false and cruel. I am asking you to choose between a wedding that looks good in photographs and a marriage that can survive an honest boundary. The boundary is simple. Do not erase the person who paid the bill. Do not erase the person who raised the groom. Do not erase your own ability to say, "This is wrong," even when silence would be easier. You may be angry with me today. You may call it stubbornness. You may call it pride. I can live with either word. Pride, in my dictionary, is the straight back you keep when you sign your name. Stubbornness is the decision not to abandon yourself to keep the peace. We will need a measure of each if the family we are building is going to hold. When you were 6, you dropped the little porcelain cup we bought in Napa. It cracked around the middle, and you cried as if you had broken the sky. Your father glued it. We kept it. We drink from it. The line around its belly holds a history of clumsy hands and careful mending. I am setting this letter beside that cup tonight. If you come by tomorrow, you will find them together on the table. If you do not, they will wait. I love Sarah because you do. I will not pretend that love erases the work two people must do. Tell her this from me. I am not asking for a spotlight. I am asking for a chair with my name on it. The room is big enough for grace and for truth. If you read this someday, know that my silence was always meant to make room for you, and that my voice today is meant to make room for me. Both rooms belong in one house. The doors swing on the same hinges. With love, Mom. The suspension order went out at 8 on a Tuesday morning. Avery sent the notices with his usual clipped language, nothing ornamental, just weight carried in plain print. By 9, the dominoes began to tip. First came Camille, the planner. Her voicemail was strained, formal. Mrs. Hale, we've received legal instruction to halt all coordination for the Hale Vineyard event until verification of authority is complete. Please confirm if this is accurate. She had built her reputation on smoothing storms. Now she was caught in one she could not spin. I did not call her back. The document spoke for me. Next was Marco, the general manager of the inn beside the vineyard. He knew me well enough not to waste words. His email was one line. Per instruction. All blocks released. No new reservations accepted until you lift the freeze. The hotel lobby that morning would have echoed with unanswered questions. Guests redirected. Clerks following scripts they did not understand. But Marco followed mine. Then Chef Luc called, his French vowels clipped short. Madame Hale, we received notice to suspend all tastings, menu planning, and catering prep. Shall I inform my staff to stand by? I told him yes. He did not argue. He had once watched me fire a supplier who tried to slip in inferior cuts. He knew when a decision was not up for discussion. Each confirmation landed like a stone in still water, sending rings outward. The family had treated my role as decorative, a woman with a checkbook and no spine. Now the industry recognized the line had shifted. I spoke little, only a few acknowledgments, and then I hung up the phone. Silence did the work. I stepped outside and walked toward the storage house. The morning air carried the cold bite of February, sharp enough to wake me. Inside, rows of oak barrels stretched into shadow, the scent of wood and ferment holding the air close. My hand brushed the curve of one cask. The sound it gave back was hollow, a soft thud that traveled through my palm. Each barrel was a contract too, waiting, holding, not yet released. The vineyard was still. Pruning would begin in March. The vines stood bound and leafless, but beneath the soil they were alive, storing energy for spring. I thought of that as I listened to the dry creak of wood around me. Things look dormant when they are only gathering. The notices had gone out to Camille, to Marco, to Luc. By noon, the entire chain would know the pause was mine to control. No explanation, no dramatics, just a suspension stamped with my authority. I sat on a crate and let the silence build. My phone buzzed with numbers I recognized and chose not to answer. Sometimes the most powerful word is nothing at all. Let them sit with it. Let them learn the weight of an absence they tried to design. The barrels answered me again when I rose. The small knock of wood against wood. It sounded like agreement. They gathered at Linda's house the night the suspension took hold. Word reached me through neighbors and through silence. When no one calls, you know they are circling. Her living room was set up like a committee hall. Chairs pulled close, voices rising through the walls. They talked about tours, about vendors who might still take them, about whether another vineyard 2 valleys over would accept a last-minute booking. Each suggestion ran against the stone of reality. The industry knew my signature, and no one wanted to cross it. Linda's voice carried the sharpest edge. We cannot lose face over this. The invitations are printed. People will talk. Her fear was not about love or vows or even Sarah's happiness. It was about appearance. To Linda, dignity was borrowed from other people's eyes. Ethan sat at the edge of the room. He said little. His silence pressed against the walls heavier than any word. I imagined him tugging at his shirt cuff, looking down, not wanting to choose. A son between 2 women, and the only tool he reached for was quiet. They considered threats. Someone said, "We'll move the wedding. She can't own every acre." But they didn't know how far my holding stretched, how carefully Daniel and I had tied each thread. The pause order had already made its rounds. Phones were answered with polite refusals. Availability suddenly vanished. Linda must have felt the walls close in, yet she pressed harder. We will not let Sylvia dictate. She has always wanted control. The next day, Margaret came to me, my older sister, her hair now silver, shoulders bent from years of labor that never earned enough rest. She found me by the rows where the wind pulled at the loose canes. "Em," she began, soft, "don't push Ethan into a corner. He's just trying to start his life. Weddings are fragile things. You don't want to be the reason he breaks with his wife before it begins." I set down the shears I had been using and wiped my palms. She looked at me with pleading eyes, not hostile, worried. Margaret had seen enough family cracks to know how quickly they spread. "Em don't want him to lose face," she continued. "If this suspension stays, people will whisper that the groom's mother wrecked the plans. Let him stand tall. Don't make him bow before his in-laws." I studied her. For years, she had been my companion in silence, helping me load crates, keeping Daniel's notes safe. Now she wore Linda's worry like borrowed clothing. I asked slowly, "Chi fears he will lose face, or that I will lose myself." The words caught her off guard. She opened her mouth, then closed it. My question was not sharp. It was steady, a mirror held up. She blinked at it. "I never wanted to erase him," I said. "I wanted to stand beside him, but they asked me to vanish, to give money and disappear. What kind of lesson does that teach?" Margaret shifted her weight, eyes lowering. "You know Linda. She's terrified of gossip. She thinks if Sarah's family looks weak, people will judge. She would rather paint you as the villain than admit she can't pay for the picture she promised." There it was, the fear behind Linda's cruelty, not hatred of me, but dread of humiliation. She believed image was survival. I breathed in and let the valley air steady me. "Dignity," I said, "does not come from silencing others. It comes from standing true even when eyes are on you. I am not the one teaching Ethan shame. I am teaching him that boundaries are not betrayal." Margaret had no answer. She looked at the rose, nodded once, and left me standing with the shears still in my hand. The rumors reached me before noon, carried not by family but by strangers. A florist I once hired sent a message. "Sorry, Mrs. Hale. People are saying you're blocking your son's wedding, making it hard for the bride." Then came a second note, then a third. By evening, the story had hardened into gossip. The rich mother who wanted control, the widow who couldn't let go. Anonymous messages found their way into my inbox. One read, "Shame on you. Let them have their day." Another, harsher, "Money doesn't buy love. Stop ruining things." No signature, only shadows behind a screen. I stared at the words, the sharpness of them. None of the writers knew me, yet they felt certain. The deposit had become the symbol. $40,000 painted as a leash. They said Sarah was humiliated, that Ethan was caught between an overbearing mother and a wedding collapsing around him. I knew how easily perception shapes truth. It did not matter that I had given quietly, that the contracts bore my name. In whispers, I was the villain. I showed Avery one of the messages during our call. He adjusted his glasses, read it once, and set the paper down. "People always tell stories to protect their own shame," he said. "This is noise. Our filings are clean. Vendors know where authority lies. Let the documents answer, not your voice." "Do I reply?" I asked, dulled. "No. The more you defend yourself in rumor, the more real the rumor becomes. Silence in law is not weakness, it's strategy." I folded the printout, slid it under the porcelain cup on my desk. Tea had spilled earlier, leaving a brown stain that bled into the paper's edge. The ink blurred, but the cruelty remained. I pressed the cup down gently. A cracked cup, a stained page. Both carried stories people preferred not to see. Outside, the vineyard was quiet. Workers trimmed, tied, prepared for spring. Each motion practical, unbothered by gossip. Grapes did not listen to rumors. They listened to water and light. I let that thought steady me. The phone buzzed again with another notification. I didn't look. The weight of the cup was enough. The conference room smelled faintly of leather and ink, the kind of air that carries weight without sound. I sat at the head of the table, the vineyard seal etched into the glass wall behind me. Avery had gathered two of his associates, both younger, both alert. The trust documents lay in front of us, a stack thick enough to anchor the moment. He began by reading from the top page. Hale Family Trust, revised 2017, establishes Mrs. Sylvia Hale as sole trustee. Ownership includes vineyard properties, hotel subsidiary, catering division, and brand rights. No amendment filed, no successor named. His voice did not need to rise. Each word landed like a gavel. One associate, a woman named Claire, flipped to a section and tapped her pen. Here, brand protection clause. Language states that any public defamation or misrepresentation affecting the owner's reputation allows immediate suspension of services until resolution. Intent is not punitive. It's to shield the integrity of the brand and event experience. She looked at me directly. That covers the gossip, Mrs. Hale. If they say you're unstable, if they paint you as the obstacle, that counts. The room was quiet for a beat. I let my eyes rest on the documents, seeing not only the words but the years they represented. Daniel's hand guiding mine when we first drafted them, his insistence that dignity must be guarded as carefully as profit. He had been right. We do not cancel the wedding outright, I said. My voice was calm, clipped. We suspend under brand protection. Vendors remain bound but paused. The door is not locked. Avery nodded. Exactly. Suspension maintains leverage without burning contracts. They cannot claim damages. They cannot paint you vindictive. I reached for the addendum draft. It was a single sheet, plain, waiting for ink. The clause I had insisted on was printed clearly. Services may be reinstated upon formal apology to the trustee and public acknowledgement of her role as benefactor. Apology to be written, signed, and read aloud at reception. It was not about humiliation. It was about truth. I wanted them to own what they had tried to erase. Redemption was possible, but not free. I signed my name at the bottom. Steady strokes. S, then H, the way I had done 1,000 times before. The associates exchanged glances, not surprise, but respect. They saw I was not flinching. We'll circulate this addendum to vendors within the hour, Avery said. By tomorrow, every party connected to the event will understand the conditions. The family can choose, acknowledgement or nothing. The pen clicked softly as I set it down. No raised voice, no lecture, just paper, ink, signature. I leaned back in my chair and let silence hold the room. In my mind, I pictured Ethan, Sarah, Linda reading those lines. Perhaps anger first, then shame, then the slow recognition that doors close unless you knock properly. My son might feel torn, but he would also see. His mother was not erased. She had drawn the boundary in legal ink. The vineyard beyond the glass stretched wide, rows stripped for winter, waiting. Power was not in shouting. Power was in contracts that told the truth when people refused to. The boardroom sits on the ridge above the valley, glass on 3 sides, oak table in the center. I arrived early and set 3 glasses of water in a neat line. No flowers. Ethan and Sarah came together. They stood close, but not touching. Linda was not invited. I had been explicit about that in the email. This conversation needed no chorus. I gestured to the chairs. We sat. I kept my hands folded. They fidgeted. The room held the vineyard like a painting. A hawk circled outside. The air conditioner hummed. For a full minute, I said nothing. Silence settled like a cloth over a wound. Thank you for meeting me, I began. I will be brief. You have 3 options. I slid 3 envelopes across the table, each labeled. Sarah glanced at Ethan. He nodded for her to open them. She read, eyes moving quickly. He read over her shoulder. Option A, I said. Cancellation with refund as permitted under the contract. We release all dates and vendors. The matter ends. There is no venue, no suites, no chef. The deposit returns less administrative fees listed on page 2. I let the words land. You will need a new plan. Option B, I said, tapping the second envelope. A simple ceremony at a public restaurant of your choice. I will not interfere. I will not attend unless invited. I will contribute nothing, and I will demand nothing. It is yours to design on your budget. Option C, I said. The vineyard as scheduled, with conditions. A written apology signed by both of you. A public acknowledgement at the reception that I funded the event. A commitment that no vendor will receive conflicting instructions again. I will attend quietly. I will sit where you place me. I will not take the microphone. The point is recognition, not spectacle. No one spoke. The hawk drifted. The sun slid along the table edge. Ethan cleared his throat, failed to speak, tried again. Sarah set the papers down and folded her hands. She said, "Mrs. Hale, I never meant to hurt you." Her voice wavered, then steadied. "I was afraid of looking small in front of my family." She swallowed. "I handled it poorly." It was the closest she had come to an apology. It was not one. I nodded once. Fear of smallness makes people do small things. I kept my tone neutral. "This is not punishment. It is correction." Ethan leaned forward. "Mom, is the apology truly necessary? Could we acknowledge you privately and move on?" He looked tired. Rings under his eyes had deepened since the suspension. "It is necessary," I said. "You tried to write me out. The correction must be public to match the harm. The promise is simple. Tell the truth about who paid. Stop misrepresenting who decides." He stared at the glass of water. His finger traced a ring of condensation. "What if we choose option B?" "Then you have a wedding on your terms," I said. "And a marriage that begins without debt to me. Some people prefer that." I let the possibility breathe. "I would accept it." Sarah asked, "And if we choose A?" Her chin lifted. She wanted courage to look like control. "If you choose A," I said, "the refund processes within 10 business days. The vendors revert to available. The story ends. There is no shame in starting over." I slid a final sheet across the table, a single sentence with a date and a time. "Whichever path you choose, I require your signatures by Friday at 5. Past that, the suspension converts to cancellation under the brand protection clause." More silence. Real silence this time, not a tactic. Ethan looked out at the vines. Sarah folded the envelopes into a stack as if order could make the decision lighter. He said, very quietly, "I need time." "I have a lifetime," I answered. "But the contract has a deadline." We stood. They left with the envelopes. I stayed with the hawk and the hum and the valley below. The room felt brighter when the door clicked shut. Not because I had won, but because the terms were finally clear. Today. The revolving door at the hotel lobby always made me pause. Glass curved in 4 panels, each slice reflecting back a different version of myself. Widow, mother, owner, outcast. That morning, I stepped in, the panels turning with a hush. My coat brushed the brass rail. Light from the Napa sun scattered across the marble floor ahead. It felt like crossing a threshold again. Marco waited near the reception desk, a clipboard tucked under his arm. He was 50, sharp in his dark suit, always steady. "Mrs. Hale," he said, lowering his voice, "I wanted to let you know what happened last night." He guided me aside, away from the flow of check-ins. One of Sarah's relatives called, tried to pressure the front desk into reopening reservations. Said you had no authority, that your suspension was personal. But the junior clerk, David, just 22, stood his ground. He pulled up the file, pointed to your trustee authority, and refused to override it. Marco's smile was small but certain. He told them, "Mrs. Hale signs every page. If you want this changed, take it up with her directly." I felt the air shift. A young employee, someone who owed me nothing, had chosen to guard my name like it mattered. That was loyalty not purchased, but born. I nodded slowly. "Thank him for me," I said. My voice was softer than I expected. Marco tilted his head. "He already asked me to tell you himself." A few moments later, David appeared from the back office. Nervous, thin-framed, tie slightly crooked, he held a small paper bag, folded neat at the top. "Mrs. Hale," he said, cheeks coloring. "I hope this isn't too forward." He set the bag on the counter. Inside, I saw a box of loose tea from a local Napa shop, the kind Daniel used to buy when we had barely enough money for wine, let alone hotels. "I read an old blog post," David explained quickly. "It was about you and Mr. Hale, the early days. How you used to brew tea from Vineyard herbs when you couldn't afford proper blends. How you called it your lucky ritual before meetings." His hands fidgeted. "I thought, you might like this. Just a way of saying we see you, and we respect what you built." For a long breath, I didn't answer. The revolving door behind me turned, guests coming and going, each step echoing. I thought of that blog entry, one I had written for Daniel years ago, half diary, half letter. I hadn't known anyone still read it. The fact that a young clerk in my own hotel had, and cared enough to bring me tea, felt heavier than any contract I'd signed that week. I lifted the bag gently, as though it were glass. "Thank you," I said. Just 2 words, but the boy's shoulders eased as if I'd absolved him of a weight. Marco clasped my elbow lightly, an anchor. "This is what legacy looks like," he murmured. "Not just contracts, not just vineyards, but the people who carry your story forward." I turned toward the revolving door again, tea bag in hand. I stepped inside, the panel shifting me back into the world outside. For a second, my reflection doubled, past and present. A widow with lines on her face, a girl who once poured tea in chipped mugs, a matriarch with a vineyard behind her name. As I emerged into sunlight, the air crisp on my cheeks, I smiled, quietly, not because I had won yet, but because I realized I was not alone. My family, the one of paper and blood, might fracture, but another was forming, seed by seed. The clerk, the manager, the workers who remembered Daniel's notes and Rosa's words. Chosen, not given. The revolving door turned once more behind me. The storm did not arrive with thunder. It came through whispers dressed as certainty. Linda began calling vendors, weaving her version of events. To her, I was not a widow who had kept a vineyard alive. I was a jealous mother who wanted the spotlight. She told Camille, the planner, that the real issue was my ego, not her daughter's choices. Then she pushed further. On the program, she insisted, replace mother of the groom with an escort, just someone to walk him in. She doesn't belong there. The cruelty was casual, practiced. Linda never raised her voice. She dripped poison like sugar, slow and sweet. I did not hear her live, but Avery forwarded me the recordings Camille had discreetly shared. Her tone was polite, rehearsed. For the vibe, she said, always that word. We must protect the couple's peace. That evening, my phone blinked with a voicemail. Ethan's voice, worn thin. Mom, we need peace. Please, don't make this harder than it is. Sarah's upset. Linda's under stress. Maybe just let this go. His words fractured at the edges. like glass ready to crack. He did not ask about the truth. He asked for quiet. I sat at the kitchen table with the voicemail in my hand, the tea bag David had given me resting nearby. I did not call back. Silence was my only answer. Sometimes silence carries more weight than argument. The next morning, Avery sent a file through secure email. I opened it slowly. Inside was a transcript. Camille, pressured to change the authorized contact on all contracts. Linda had claimed to act with my consent, telling vendors that I was stepping aside for the good of the family. She wanted every communication redirected through her. It was clear, deliberate misrepresentation. Avery's note was brief. This is the evidence. Objective. Irrefutable. I read the lines twice, then a third time. The words were not angry. They were worse. They were efficient. Authorized contact to be updated to Linda Walker. The planner had pushed back, gently, but Linda had pressed harder. The bride's mother speaks for the family, she said. The trust documents lay open on my desk, the ink of my signature unshaken by rumor. Misrepresentation was not only an ethical breach, it was a legal one. Contracts exist for such storms. I let my hand rest on Daniel's old mug, chipped and steady. I thought of Rosa's reminder. They wanted to erase a story. I thought of Ethan's plea, peace at any cost. And I thought of Linda's voice, calm and cruel, rewriting me out of my own son's life. I did not answer Ethan. I did not answer Linda. I did not even answer Camille. My silence was not surrender. It was the space between the strike and the echo. The boardroom sat high above the valley, windows cut wide to the vines rolling down the slope. I chose the same table as before, oak polished to a sheen, chairs placed with deliberate care. This time, no empty seats. Ethan and Sarah sat together, hands tight, eyes hollow. Linda arrived with her husband trailing a step behind. Her pearl necklace clicked when she folded her arms. Margaret slipped in quietly, face carved with worry. Avery stood at the end, folder under his arm, his presence calm but firm. I opened with no preamble. Thank you for coming. I will be brief. My voice carried across the glass and wood without effort. This is not about blame. It is about clarity. I slid a thin packet forward. 3 pages, clipped. This is the term sheet. The Vineyard is willing to proceed under 3 conditions. I looked at Ethan and Sarah directly. First, a handwritten letter of apology from both of you, signed before the ceremony. Second, a public acknowledgement during the reception of who funded the event. Third, a written commitment from both families that no defamatory statements about me or my role will be made to any vendor, guest, or press. Silence stretched. I did not feel it. Outside, a gust bent the vines in long waves. Linda broke first. This is humiliation, she said, voice sharp. You want to drag my daughter in front of everyone, force her to admit weakness. Do you know what that will look like in our circle? How do you expect us to show our faces? Her words cracked into a tremor. You'll ruin us. I folded my hands. I am not taking anyone's face, Linda. I am asking for my name back, nothing more. Her husband reached for her arm, but she pulled away, tears smudging her careful eyeliner. Sarah shifted, biting her lip. Ethan kept staring at the papers as though the words might rearrange into something easier. Margaret finally spoke, quiet but firm. Linda, no one is ruined by telling the truth. We all know who wrote the check. Pretending otherwise. She stopped, then sighed. That's the shame. Linda shook her head, whispering almost to herself. They'll laugh at us. I let the silence return, the room filling with the hum of the air system and the faint tick of Avery's pen against his folder. Then I leaned slightly forward. Linda, people already laugh at families who take money and erase the giver, at brides who uninvite their groom's mothers while sleeping in suites built by her company. The laughter is already here. What I am offering is dignity, a chance to correct the story before it spreads further. Ethan finally raised his eyes. He looked not at me, but at Sarah. We should sign, he said, voice barely audible. It's the right thing. Sarah swallowed, tears trembling at the corners of her lashes. I never wanted it to be like this. Then let it be otherwise, I said. 3 conditions. Nothing hidden, nothing cruel, just the truth, written and spoken. Linda collapsed into her chair, shoulders shaking, her protest drowned in her own sobs. I did not gloat. I did not move. I simply repeated, softly, I am not taking face. I am asking for a name. Avery laid 2 pens on the table, one before Ethan, one before Sarah. The papers waited. The vines outside swayed, patient, as if they knew that truth, like harvest, always comes in season. I came home to quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against the walls, heavy and close. The chair at the end of the table, Daniel's chair, sat empty, its wood worn smooth by years of his steady hands. I rested my bag down and let myself sink into the silence. My bones ached from holding composure all day. The kettle hissed, then clicked off. I poured water into the chipped Napa cup, the one with the faint crack Daniel had once defended. Don't throw it out. A crack just proves it's been used. I sat, staring at the faint line, steam curling into the air. There was a knock, soft, hesitant. Margaret stepped in, hair pulled back, eyes swollen as if she had not slept. She carried nothing but a folded handkerchief. She did not sit until I gestured. She spoke quickly, words tumbling. Sylvia, there's something I never told you. Years ago, when Alan lost his job and we were about to lose the house, I begged you to co-sign that loan. No one else knew. You stood in that bank with me, signed your name, took the debt. We kept the roof. We kept our dignity. I never said it out loud until now. I remembered the afternoon in the cramped bank office, the pen heavy in my hand, Margaret's face pale and desperate. I had carried that burden quietly, never asking repayment, never bringing it up in arguments. I let it slip into the silence of all the other sacrifices. Margaret's voice broke. I told myself I'd make it up to you, but instead, I sat by while Linda twisted the story, while Ethan stayed silent. I let them erase you, the very person who once saved me. She covered her eyes, shoulders trembling. I did not speak. I let the silence do its work. When she finally lowered her hands, she placed something small in my palm. A button, pearl gray, edges dulled with years. It's from Daniel's wedding suit. He wore it that day, and I kept it after the jacket fell apart. I should have given it to you long ago. The button sat against my skin, cool, familiar, I set it next to the cracked cup, the two objects side by side, one that held tea, one that once held a vow, both scarred, both still holding. Margaret whispered, "You deserved better than our silence." I looked at the button, then at her. My voice was quiet. "We all deserved better." She wept openly then, tears darkening the handkerchief. I did not move to comfort her. I simply kept the button close, the weight of an unspoken truth now spoken at last. Dawn lay across the vineyard like a silver shawl. Frost clung to the wires. The rows held their breath. I stood by the loading bay with a thermos when Ethan's car turned up the gravel lane. He parked crooked, sat a moment with his forehead to the wheel, then climbed out. No Sarah, only my son, taller than his father, eyes steady and unsure. "Morning," I said. "Morning," he answered. We did not rush toward each other. We walked the first row where winter had stripped the vines to bone. He pushed his hands into his pockets the way he did at 12 when he had done something wrong and wanted to confess without words. He started with a memory. "Do you remember the year the pumps failed?" he said. "You carried crates while Dad fixed the line. Your palms bled through your gloves. I told you to stop. You said, 'The fruit does not wait.'" I remembered the handles biting, Daniel calling, "Keep going, Sil," and Ethan following like a shadow. He stopped. "Mom, I am sorry," he said. "I let people talk about you like a problem to manage. I wanted quiet more than right. Linda pushed. Sarah cried. I thought if I kept my head down, the noise would pass. I made it louder." Wind moved down the slope. I said nothing. "I signed last night," he added. "Option C, we will write the letters. I will say your name at the reception. Not because you forced me, but because it is true. I owe you more than silence." At the end of the road, the view broke open to the valley. He looked at the hills, then at his hands. "You taught me to steer the forklift," he said. "You let me think I was driving when you were holding the back. I never asked who steadied me when I swerved." I poured him tea. He wrapped both hands around the cup like a boy told to warm up before the game. "Mom," he said, "I want to read something at the wedding. A thank you. Not long. Just clear. I want people to know how we got there. I want Sarah to hear it from me." "You chose a wife," I said. "Not your mother. That is right. But you can choose how to be a husband." I let the line rest. Choose to tell the truth when it costs comfort. Choose to protect dignity both ways. He nodded. "I can do that." "Then do it without turning me into a weapon," I said. "No list of debts. No heat. Say only what is necessary." "I will," he said. We stood while a truck rumbled far off. I thought of the button Margaret gave me, round and steady in my pocket, and the cracked cup at home beside the letter I had not sent. He spoke again, softer. "I told Sarah I was afraid of disappointing you and her at the same time. She said fear makes small rooms. I let the room shrink until there was no chair left for you." He swallowed. "I am opening the room back up." "That is a husband speaking," I said. "I know Linda will be angry," he said. "She will say we lost face." "Faces do not break when truth is spoken," I said. "They heal." He looked relieved. "Will you sit wherever we place you?" "I will," I said. "Will you taste the menu when the suspension lifts?" "I will," I said again. He exhaled. He finished the tea and handed me the empty cup. I capped the thermos and slipped it into my bag. "Thank you for the pause," he said. I hated it. I needed it. "The fruit does not wait," I answered. "But people can." I turned toward the rose. "Go home. Write your letter. Bring Sarah tomorrow. We will taste the soup your father loved." He smiled, the boy and the man lining up in one face. "I will bring her," he said. We walked back to the loading bay. At the gate, he looked at me like he wanted to hug me, then chose not to, honoring the space we were building. Instead, he touched my sleeve, small and careful, the way you test a wire before trusting its hold. Then he nodded. "I will be the husband I want our son to watch someday," he said. "Good," I answered. "Begin now." He drove away down the gravel lane. Frost lifted from the wires. The valley brightened by a shade. I stood a minute longer, feeling the ground steady under my boots, knowing something had turned and would keep turning if we carried it right. I breathed once, slow and sure, and let the morning hold me upright. For now, here. The envelope arrived by hand. Sarah's handwriting wavered across the front, letters uneven, as if each stroke argued with itself. Inside, on plain cream paper, the apology trembled in ink. "Mrs. Hale, I was wrong. I let fear speak louder than gratitude. I let my mother's pride drown out my own heart. Please forgive me. Please allow me to honor you properly." The words were not polished. They did not try to be clever. They were human, shaky, and in their imperfection they carried weight. I set the letter beside Daniel's cracked cup and the button Margaret had given me. Objects in a row, scarred, ordinary, enduring. Camille called that afternoon, voice softer than I had ever heard. "Mrs. Hale, I've redone the schedule. The guest count is now 40. We've cut the excess, kept the essentials. No spotlight, no grandeur, just vows, music, and supper. Will you review?" I listened to her list. Smaller hall, trimmed flowers, one-string quartet instead of a band. She had stripped away the show and left something bare, almost tender. Chef Luke came next. "Madame Hale." I added a soup, simple onion, the kind your husband liked. I thought it belonged. His tone was gentle, without presumption. I pictured Daniel at our kitchen table, spoon in hand, steam on his glasses. A wedding menu touched by his memory, quiet, unadvertised, but present. I nodded, though Luke could not see. When Ethan stopped by to confirm the changes, I told him my seat. "Not the front row," I said. "Put me in the middle, among the people. Not behind a dais, not beside a spotlight. A mother watching her son, nothing more." He looked surprised, then relieved. "You're sure?" "I am sure," I said. "That is the dignity I want." The Vineyard calendar turned its page. Rose greened, air warmed. The wedding would not be what they first imagined. It would be smaller, humbler, but, perhaps for the first time, true. The valley glowed like a bowl of honey. Evening light streamed across the rows of vines, each leaf holding a drop of gold. Guests gathered beneath the arbor, 40 chairs set in careful lines, not too close, not too far. The air carried the sound of strings and the faint perfume of roses tucked into jars on each table. I sat midway down the aisle, the place I had chosen, not hidden, not exalted, just present. A mother among witnesses. Margaret at my side, Rosa 2 rows back, Marco and Luke standing near the service tables like guardians in plain clothes. Ethan and Sarah stood at the altar, their hands shaking, but not from fear. The officiant lifted the book, spoke words about love as patience, about vows as promises that bend but do not break. Before the rings, Ethan asked for the microphone. His voice wavered at first, then found its steadiness. Before Sarah and I pledge our vows, there is someone we must honor. None of us would be here without her. She gave more than money. She gave the labor of her hands, the strength of her silence, the patience of her love. For years I forgot to say it. Tonight I will. Thank you, Mom. He turned, eyes meeting mine. They did not beg, did not excuse. They acknowledged. That was enough. Applause rose, not forced, but warm. I let it wash over without lifting my hand. Then Sarah stepped forward. She held the mic close. I wronged you, she said, voice plain, eyes wet. Eyes. I listened to fear instead of respect. I asked you not to come. Yet you came anyway, and you gave me more than I deserved. Thank you for teaching me what grace looks like. Her words were brief, but they were hers, not Linda's, not scripted. I believed her. That, too, was enough. The officiant cleared his throat, returned to the vows. Rings were exchanged. Lips met. The valley cheered softly. Later, at the tables, candles flickered in jars. I placed Daniel's cracked cup before me, poured a small stream of the new white vintage we had bottled only weeks ago. Pale gold filled the fracture lines. Still, the cup held steady. Vessels crack, I said quietly to the woman seated beside me, but they can still carry water. My own echo line, returning home. The cameras recording the day caught the silence that followed. 2 beats of stillness stretched wide enough for breath, for truth, for memory. I did not move houses. I did not sell off the vineyard or announce a dramatic break. Severance, when it came, was quieter than people expected. I signed new papers with Avery, revoked the old power of attorney, drew a clean line around my finances. No more blurred access. No more signatures in someone else's pocket. The trust was settled next. A portion of the vineyard's profits would fund a scholarship in Daniel's name. One for children of field workers, another in Rosa's. She had bent her back in the rows long before the land bore fruit. It was time her name bore something permanent. I felt no anger as I signed, just steadiness. Paperwork can be vengeance, but it can also be protection. Weeks later, Marco asked me to speak at a training for new hires at the hotel. 10 minutes, Mrs. Hale. Tell them why names matter here. So I stood before a dozen fresh uniforms. I told them about a vineyard once called worthless, about a cup once cracked, about a woman once asked not to attend her own son's wedding. Names carry history, I said, and respect is the soil that lets people grow. They nodded. Some scribbled notes. One girl wiped her eyes. Afterward, Luke brought out bowls of soup, the same onion broth Daniel loved. Rosa sat with us under the arbor, hands folded over the notebook of harvests she still kept. Marco poured glasses, toasting not profit but patience. Around that table, laughter rose, younger voices mixing with older ones. None of them shared my blood, Yet they carried me more surely than family had in years. A chosen family, formed not by duty, but by recognition. The vines outside stirred in the evening wind, leaves rustling like applause. I thought, this is what survival looks like, not severing with noise, but building with care. I wrote a new letter tonight, not to Ethan, but to the woman I will be in 10 years, and to any mother staring at a phone that will not ring. I dated it in blue ink, folded the page once, and began with what I wish someone had told me when the first crack appeared in the cup. This is not a letter about winning. It is a letter about standing, about the quiet you choose, not the silence forced upon you, about remembering that a life is not a guest list. It is a threshold you are allowed to cross. Today, dear future me, and dear you who are listening, if you are waiting for an invitation, you can stop waiting. The door to your own life is already unlocked. You do not have to earn your seat by being smaller, softer, or silent. Be kind and keep your name. Love people and still say no to erasure. Hold boundaries without raising your voice. Lift standards without shaming anyone. When fear says keep the peace, ask, peace for whom? Choose the quiet that protects dignity, not the quiet that hides harm. If respect is missing, bring it. If it will not arrive, withdraw your gift and keep your worth. Call things by their names, then keep moving. When I paused the wedding, I did not punish anyone. I corrected the story. Paper can feel cold, but sometimes it is the clean bandage a wound requires. I thanked Rosa for the ledger that keeps our seasons honest, Marco for the steadiness that guards the door, Luke for the soup that remembers Daniel, and the young clerk who brought tea when the room felt cold. I told myself to remember Ethan at dawn, standing in frost, choosing truth even when it cost comfort. I promised to keep a chair open for him and for Sarah, as long as respect sits in it first. That is the shape of peace I can live with. It is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of honesty. If the cup cracks again, and it will, carry it with 2 hands. Speak less. Write more. Hold fast. Put your name where it belongs. If you feel yourself shrinking, step into the light and stand still until your breath returns. If you feel alone, reach for the people who have proven themselves steady. Chosen family grows like vines, one trellis at a time. I signed the letter and read it aloud in the kitchen. The house listened. Then I folded it and slid it under the Napa cup. Paper under porcelain. Story under symbol. I left it there like a small anchor, enough weight to remind me that wholeness is not perfection. It is the courage to be held together. Before we say goodbye, we would love to know, where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with coffee or a late night where stories keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing, not just to hear more stories like this, but to join a community that believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, carry this story with you and remember this truth. Sometimes the miracle does not knock. It waits quietly for you to open your heart. Take care, and we will see you in the next story. I opened the vineyard gate halfway. Wind lifted leaves. The path waited. So did I tonight.